Og við heyrum í Martin Feldstein, hagfræðiprófessor við Harvard-háskóla, en hann var efnahagsráðgjafi Reagans Bandaríkjaforseta og á sínum tíma og sætti gagnrýni í heimildamyndinni Inside Job fyrir óeðlileg hagsmunatengsl.
Over the last decade, the financial services industry has made about $5 billion worth of political contributions in the United States. It's kind of a lot of money. That doesn't bother you?
No.
Martin Feldstein is a professor at Harvard and one of the world's most prominent economists. As President Reagan's chief economic advisor, he was a major architect of deregulation. And from 1988 until 2009, he was on the board of directors of both AIG and AIG Financial Products, which paid him millions of dollars.
You have any regrets about having been on AIG's board?
I have no comments. No, I have no regrets about being on AIG's board.
None?
That I can say, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Okay. You have any regrets about AIG's decisions?
I cannot say anything more about AIG.
You've written a very large number of articles about a very wide array of subjects. You never saw fit to investigate the risks of unregulated credit default swaps?
I never did.
Same question with regard to executive compensation, the regulation of corporate governance, the effect of political contributions.
I don't know that I would have anything to add to those discussions.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works.
En Martin Feldstein hefur verið hagfræðiprófessor við Harvard-háskóla í áratugi og nú kominn á áttræðisaldur. Hann einn þeirra sem var bent á sem dæmi mann með óeðlileg hagsmunatengsl í heimildarmyndinni Inside Job sem var sýnd hér á RÚV fyrir skemmstu, en hún fjallar aðdragandan að hruni bandaríska efnahagskerfisins, enda hefði hann setið í stjórn fyrirtækja eins og AIG árabil og þegið fyrir það mikið fé. Þrátt fyrir það, auk þess að hafa verið efnahagsráðgjafi Ronalds Reagan á sínum tíma, valdi Barack Obama hann þó strax í nefndum endurreisn efnahagslífsins þegar hann tók við embætti og sjálfur segir Feldstein að það sé ekki rétt að það þurfi að umbylta kerfinu til að ná fram meiri jöfnuði og velsæld, en pólitískt þurfi vissulega að breyta ýmsu. Kastljós hitti Feldstein þegar hann var hér á landi á dögunum.
Welcome on Kastljós, Dr. Feldstein.
Very nice to be here.
There has been a lot of turmoil in the US economy, and a movement like the Occupy Wall Street movement that just wants to, I don't know whether to turn it upside down, but at least to shake it up and change it radically. What's your take on that? What's your view on that?
I think it's running out of steam. You know, it was a little exciting. There were a lot of unemployed young people, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy this, Occupy that, but it's handfuls. It's really small numbers, and they don't have a clear agenda. For some of the young people, it was the universities should forgive our student loans. For others, the bank should forgive our mortgage debt. But it didn't really have any kind of organizing principle beyond that. It was complaining, but without any real agenda.
So you don't think there is actually need to change anything
scrap
radically?
The whole system. No,
I wouldn't say
don't.
scrap the whole system, but make some radical changes. But because what people are complaining about are inequalities and which they blame the economic system for.
No, I don't see the case for, quote, radical change. We're always in the process of looking at the safety net and asking whether it's being done well to protect people against poverty. I think we spend much too much of our safety net on people who aren't anywhere close to poverty and not enough on poverty. So, for example, the Social Security pension system in the United States. So, unlike Iceland, our pension system is a pay-as-you-go, tax-financed federal program. It's a large program. It spends about 4% of GDP, more than $500 billion a year. And yet, there's still a lot of poor old people. Something's wrong with the way it's designed. And Yet the higher your lifetime income, the more you get from this program. So it doesn't make the rich richer, but it is not an adequate program for preventing poverty in old age, even though we're spending so much money. So I wouldn't call it radical, but I would say we ought to go in there and rethink the way these benefits are designed so that you don't have anybody who is 65, 70 years old and poor, even though they're entitled to get something from the Social Security system.
Now, if we look at the economic situation on this side of the Atlantic, I'm sorry.
I thought we're in the middle of the Atlantic.
Yeah, now we are. But you've written quite a bit on the euro. Yep. You've been a skeptic from day one.
Yes.
And said that the common cause of some common serious problems of the EU countries is, in fact, the euro.
I wasn't the only one. A number of economists said there are these problems if you take a heterogeneous group of countries and impose a single currency on them. You're going to end up with higher unemployment rates. You're going to end up with bigger trade imbalances because you have no way of adjusting country by country. To deal with that, everybody is forced to have the same interest rate and the same exchange rate. But the politicians really weren't interested. Their goal was much more political, and the euro was there as a kind of symbol of the fact that, from their point of view, they were moving to a common political system, and that's what they wanted to emphasize, and they just didn't focus enough on the economic consequences of using the euro as a technique for advancing a political cause.
But is there a chance of it recovering, or are you predicting the death of the euro?
No, I'm not. No, I think we may see Greece pull out because the Greek situation is much worse than other countries in Europe. Conceivably, Portugal would pull out, but not Italy, not Spain, not France. So I think that although in many ways the euro was a mistake, but it's a mistake that was made, and it's hard to unwind. There will be a lot of costs of unwinding it, cross-border debts that would be hard to deal with.
Now, Már Guðmundsson, our head of the Icelandic Fed, said today it's a sovereign debt crisis, it's not a currency crisis, it's a bank crisis. Do you totally disagree with it?
Not at all. I think that's exactly right. It is a it is a bank crisis, it is a sovereign debt crisis, it's an unemployment problem, it's a balance of payments problem. But they all have as their origin the euro. But I think the price of giving up the euro for the eurozone as a whole would be very high.
Now, one question I always ask every big shot international economist that comes here is that we have measured everything by GDP growth for such a long time. It's been the ultimate measurement of the development of every economy. Is it possibly time that we change that measurement in the sense that happiness and the well-being of the citizens in affluent countries has not grown at the same rate?
Well, let me give you two answers to a very good question. One is, you wouldn't want to judge the quality of life in a country by GDP per capita. There are a lot of other things about the environment, about everything from personal safety to opportunities for leisure activities. So if you're describing why is this or that country or city a nice place to live, you don't just say the per capita GDP in this city is X. So it's obviously important, but it isn't the only measure. Now, the other thing is, I think real incomes are rising a lot faster than the way we measure it with GDP. We don't do a very good job at all of taking into account new products. or quality improvements in existing products, or quality improvements in existing services. So when you think about all the new products that we have now that enhance the pleasures of life, or that enhance health and longevity, they're not in that price index, and they're not in the GDP numbers. So I think that the public as a whole, the middle class as a whole, are seeing their real incomes rising much faster than the official statistics.
The quality of life. We're not doing a good job, actually. In
it's very hard. It's very hard. So I come along with a new drug that reduces the risk of heart attack. That's worth a lot. We have no clue as to how to put that in the price index, so they don't put it in the price index. Yet you'd pay a lot for it, a lot more than most of us have to pay to get those drugs. So I think you think about what's happened to televisions and the quality of televisions and the number of channels and all of those things. The internet, which is such an important part of everybody's life these days, and yet we don't adequately reflect that in the measured real incomes of middle-class people.
And it can actually go down if you choose to just have a 30-hour work week and take 6 weeks of summer vacation.
Absolutely.
Which you deem more worth than the income you would get.
Exactly.
Then the GDP might go down.
Right, could.
But people would be better off in a sense.
If they chose to do that, absolutely, right. And female labor force participation around the world has gone up. It's very high here. It's gone up in the U.S. That's raised GDP, so we had faster GDP growth for a while. It seems to have topped out in the United States. Does that mean that something negative has happened? No, it's that more young women are deciding that maybe they don't want to work, or they don't want to work full time. As you say, they'd rather work a 4-day week or a 3-day week and enjoy more leisure.